Hello, it's Employee a Million, and welcome to MOUSECOMS. This is the second edition of my annual series, taking advantage of the fact that Mickey Mouse cartoons are entering the public domain. And this year we're covering the 1930 batch, all the cartoons that they made of Mickey and Minnie and the gang in the year 1930, now that their copyrights have expired. This is the 16th Mickey cartoon overall, Fiddling Around, which released on March 21st, 1930. And funny thing about this one is that, just going by the title, there is some history and debate to it. When it was being made, the title was just Mickey, but then it was released and registered under the name Fiddling Around. In fact, its legally copyrighted name was Fiddlin' Around with an apostrophe. But nowadays they just call it Fiddling Around. It's the name it goes by on Disney+, but the copy of the episode that I'm commentating over here, Just Mickey, is what it was called on the 2004 DVD release, so I just have to make do with what I've got. Now, this is the first Mickey cartoon for a lot of things. It was the first one to be distributed by Columbia Pictures after Celebrity Pictures lost the rights. Columbia would distribute Disney cartoons through to 1932. It was also the first Mickey cartoon to have a new title card. Well, two kinds of title cards now, because you've got that screen of Mickey's face, and then you've got the general title card of Mickey and Minnie introducing the title of the short that's about to play. This is also the first to not be animated by Iwerks in any way. He'd left Disney by now to create Flip the Frog for Celebrity Pictures and MGM, and if you've got a chance, you could check out those Flip the Frog cartoons. They're pretty decent. They're not, as inspired as the Mickey cartoons from this time, but yeah, pretty interesting to look back on. So, yeah, new start. It could, just Mickey, the Fiddling Around, this one, could have been in pre-production while Ub was still at Disney, but it truly belongs to the other animators. We are now in the post-Ub era. And looking at Mickey himself, especially in the first minute or two of this short, you can definitely tell they're getting the hang of things, because by the time Ub left, there were some extra embellishments to Mickey's design, like the pie eyes and a more defined break from his face and at his eyes. And those got pretty difficult for other animators to, have some control of. Even Mickey's ears, sometimes they can be a bit too small, sometimes his eyes can be a bit too big. Nowadays we would call that going off model, but back in these days, just seeing them on screen was enough to still be kind of entrancing, so this could have been forgivable. I could see a past where they just got Mickey's design and personality completely wrong, and this was the beginning of the end of Mickey Mouse as a character, but I'm glad that that isn't the history we've got, because 1930 batch isn't that bad. Fiddling Around is entertaining in its own way. A comment I got on the last MOUSECOMS pointed out that the buildings in these shorts use asbestos, which is a very old kind of insulation that buildings don't have anymore because of just how toxic the chemicals in it are. And that's another thing that makes these a complete product of their time. But even if you see those little signs that these were made nearly 100 years ago, for the most part, they're still pretty entertaining. You can definitely see how hard the animators and designers and inkers are working to get these made on a monthly basis at this point. One way I figured out how to pad out the commentaries is to bring up the music in them. I covered a bit of the music in these shorts in the 28 to 29 package, but I did want to just highlight Walt's taste in music, sort of, through the Mickey cartoons. Mickey plays 3 songs in this short. Traumeri by German composer Robert Schumann, the Hungarian Dance No. 5 by Johannes Brahms, and the William Tell Overture by French composer Gioacchino Rossini. Sorry if I butchered any of these names. And the commonality between all 3 of these tunes is that they're all European ditties from the 19th century. So they're about as old as this cartoon is now, as... Yeah, so basically this is sort of the halfway point between the time those songs were composed and now. In some cases, it's a little closer to that time. And I'm just saying all this just not to scare you about the passage of time, but to show that these are early signs of Walt's affinity for European media. Like, these are all from Europe, from the 19th century. And you could already tell by how much he liked adapting fairy tales, but then you get to this, and yeah, you kind of have a good feel for, well, what Walt likes in his media. And lucky for him, it's what a lot of Americans in the 1930s wanted to see. But this short is entertaining. I like it a lot. It is very funny how well they get Mickey's personality. Like, obviously it's not perfect, but it is definitely a good way to spend 7 minutes of your time. It's got some laughs, it's got some fine old animation, and that's all I have to say on Fiddling Around. The Barnyard Concert was the second Mickey cartoon to premiere in 1930, being released on April 5th. And, you know, Fiddling Around was the start of a few things, but the Barnyard Concert was the end of an era in a few ways. This is the last one where the sound was added in post-production. Before this, sound cartoons were made by, you know, animating it, and then they would get a band and sound effect artists and voice actors to record against it. So that definitely made it way harder to synchronize the music to the cartoon. And you can kind of see in this one, compared to the next one, the way that the music is conveyed is generally quite broad. Like, it's very clear when the music is supposed to play. Whereas in the next one, they have a little more fun and experimentation in how quickly they can sync it up. But you can also kind of look at this as a prototype for the band concert, which was a landmark Mickey cartoon from 5 years after this, so 5 years until it falls into public domain, which is also about Mickey conducting other cartoon animals. And even just looking at this one, the Barnyard Concert, and comparing it to the band concert, you couldn't imagine later shorts being produced the same way as the Barnyard Concert with this, you know, using the sound in post-production. And speaking of the band concert, this is an early example of Mickey conducting an audience. And what I like about how Mickey is portrayed here is that professional conductors don't generally tap their batons on the stage. And I'm not sure how professional Mickey is supposed to be portrayed as here, but not very professional if he's doing that. This is just something done for fun. Oh, Steamboat Willie callback. And the whole Mickey being a conductor thing could be interpreted as Walt developing more of an ego against his animators and other workers at his studio and projecting that onto Mickey. Like, more and more as time goes on, you can definitely see how Mickey became Walt's self-insert avatar in these shorts. But another way that this is sort of the end of an era is this is one of the last shorts where Horace and Clarabelle prototypes appear. A different set of prototypes to the 1920s versions because they're bipeds, but they don't yet have the defining anthropomorphic features that you'd see in Horace and Clarabelle starting in, I want to say, the Shindig, which is a couple months after this. But you still see the plain crazy cow, and that was another sort of prototype for Clarabelle. So we're definitely in a point of transition. The animals are becoming more anthropomorphized, and this sort of feels like the last one where it definitely absolutely feels like the same area, the same setting as the one from Plain Crazy and the Barn Dance. Now the music this time is The Poet and Peasant Overture by Austrian composer Franz von Suppe, and yeah, it's more of the same. Their music tastes are usually a century behind the times, but it's not a great thing, it's not an awful thing, it's just Mickey's taste in music, it seems. Even if it's taking a little while to, get the thing that he wants from them, which is good music. Oh, and I like this little gag here where I think it's a bear or a pig, and there is some sort of mistake on the music sheet, but it turns out to just be a bug. It's a good gag. Legend has it that if you pitched a gag that Walt laughed at, he'd pay you an extra $5. Not sure how true that gag is, that legend, but yeah, I'd pay someone $5 if they made me laugh like that. Barnyard Concert is an alright short, that's really all I have to say about it. It's a pretty short one, so yeah, I'll see you on the next track. Enjoy the rest of it. Here we go, the third one of the year, The Cactus Kid, which released in May 19th, 1930. And the funny thing about this one is that this is sort of like the alpha and omega of Mickey's early career, because it's functionally a sequel/remake to The Galloping Gaucho. It's once again Mickey in the South doing all this wacky stuff, saving Minnie from Pete. So it harkens back to one of his earliest cartoons, but it's also the last one that Walt Disney personally directed. This was his directorial send-off for all of his cartoons until The Golden Touch 5 years later. And I won't bore you with the details of The Golden Touch because that's a whole other story, but just saying that after this, he took a full-on producer role at the Disney studio, essentially directing the directors and consolidating more power over how the shorts are done. And as you can see, this is the first one where the animators are animating to a pre-recorded track. I don't know why this took so long for them to start doing, and I'm not entirely certain who suggested this. I'm sure the answer is out there somewhere. But yeah, this is definitely an easier way to do things. You can tell that the animators they have a lot more to work with when, doing gags and helping out with making it a little bit snappier, a little bit faster. What's also interesting about this short is that this is Minnie and Pete's first appearances in the 1930s. Now, they will continue to have big roles throughout the first half of this decade, but it's a bit surprising that we're in May now, we're 3 shorts in, and only now we've got Minnie around. And Pete doesn't appear as often as her, but it's also a bit strange that it took this long to get into their bearings and feel confident enough animated Mickey Mouse cartoons to animate his friends as well. Now, a big milestone for Minnie here is that this is the first short where she's voiced by Marcelite Garner, who was her first regular voice actress. And she was only 20 at the time that she recorded this, either 19 or 20, and she kept doing this until around 1941-42. She left Disney around the time of the strike of 41, so yeah, that's about more than a decade of her voicing Minnie, and you can tell by her last shorts that her voice had gotten deeper, but that's alright. I think she did a pretty solid job as Minnie well into the end, and she was chosen because she'd only just joined the studio in the ink and paint department, which was the only place in the studio that women were allowed to work in at the time, and she was only one of two who could speak Spanish, and it was just for a joke in this short, just so, I don't know, Minnie speaking Spanish was funny. But that ended up leaving her with a permanent gig, so don't underestimate the power of being bilingual. Now, I can't really say the same about Pete here, but there are definitely defining characteristics popping up. This is his first confrontation with Mickey, in which he has a peg leg. He's going by Peg Leg Pete sometimes. If you want to know where Peg from Goof Troop got her name from, now you know. It's also the first one in general where he's got a more defined face with like a big muzzle and eyes. But still, Pete didn't have a consistent voice until Billy Bletcher came in 1934. And by this point in the episode that we're watching, it is full-on a remake of Gallopin' Gaucho, because we've got this confrontation with Mickey and Pete, and we are going to have a little chase scene at the end. But it's a bit more streamlined, it's more about gags. But it definitely has a similar story and plot beats, and even some recycled gags from last year with, you know, Mickey trying to fire a gun, not laughing weakly. But I think the gag lands a bit better here because now we've got Walt voicing Mickey permanently, which, you know, like Walt or not, I think he couldn't have done a better performance as Mickey. I think that some of the things that he says in this batch of episodes of cartoons released this year is genuinely funny. Now, the music in this short, despite supposedly having Spanish connotations, is actually mostly French. You've got the España Rhapsody, which is by French composer Emmanuel Chabrier, La Paloma, which is by Spanish composer Sebastián Heredia, and The Can-Can, which is a famous French musical piece. So, you know, even though Disney is trying to embrace the South even in a mocking way, you know, it's still more European than anything. But that's the least of this year's problems with that. I'll get to definitely something a bit more extreme at the end of the year, but for the meantime, just enjoy the rest of the short. Okay, this is the fourth Mickey short of the year, The Firefighters, which originally premiered on June 20th, 1930. And we've got the same face and title card as always, set to Minnie's Yoo-Hoo. Sometimes it's a band orchestration, sometimes it's just a xylophone orchestration. But more important to the matter is, this is the first Mickey short of the year directed by Burt Gillette, who would direct the rest of the 1930 shorts, and was a pretty prolific director overall on Mickey Mouse and Silly Symphonies. After this, he would go on to direct some milestone Silly Symphonies, Flowers and Trees, and The Three Little Pigs. And he then went on to work at Van Buren, MGM, and Walter Lantz. But I don't want to, deify him, because recollections from other animators were that he was pretty mentally ill and always drinking, and there is one, account that he even tried attacking another animator, so yeah, working for Disney must have really eaten away at something in him, or he just wasn't fit for, the pressure of directing or animating, or there was just more lead in the air in those times. It's a bit tragic and sensitive to think about 1930s mental health, but I just wanted to say this about Burt Gillette. Very talented director, but he was human. And I don't know if it was his idea or not, but early prints for the firefighters were given red tints whenever fire was on screen, and this was one of the earliest attempts from Disney or any cartoonist in general to add color to a full short. Because there were also some Silly Symphonies this year which were tinted blue and green, and yeah, it definitely makes for a simple effect, but you can definitely see their aspirations for what they wanted cartoons to be, how immersive they wanted them to be, evolving, because now they're trying to do these very basic color, experiments. And I'm not showing you a recreation of what it would have looked like colorized, but I'm just telling you that, Firefighters, as far as Mickey cartoons go, was pretty innovative. Now, there was an earlier Alice comedy from 1926 that was also about firefighters, but I think this wasn't a sequel to that and more just a common performance setting back in the 20s and 30s. You know how in those days towns and cities were smaller, so firefighters were a bit easier to call upon and more, loved in the community, and I wish it was still that way, but, Mickey's definitely a hero in this, as are his buddies, so that's a good thing. Now, historians have described this as one of the most story-tight Mickey cartoons in a while, definitely of this year. But it is definitely a very frightening scenario, a building is on fire and there's got to be a lot of fire and smoke and water around to really set an atmosphere. And we are far away from, the horrifying oceans of Pinocchio and the inferno in The Night on Bald Mountain. Disney's special effects are still pretty rudimentary, very simple patterns and cycles of fire and water. But still, for this little cartoon that they've got, it gets the job done. You still know that, as far as Rubber Hose animation goes, it's immersive enough for what they want to accomplish, which is this very perilous situation, but still have fun with it, still make it comedic. It's another example of Minnie as a damsel in distress and Mickey as a dashing hero. So again, second short in a row where this is their dynamic, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's definitely showing that they do really love each other and can't live without each other, and I think that's kind of sweet. And even though this is definitely one of the darker and more perilous Mickey Mouse cartoons this year. It's still hopeful and got a happy ending, which was kind of necessary for audiences in 1930. You know, the Depression was getting worse. They were treating Mickey cartoons like this source of escapism for adults and children. And if you look at Columbia's non-Disney cartoons from the 1930s, you get why they needed a property with a good critical reception, because I've seen a few Columbia cartoons, and most of them are very cynical, very, cruel. They don't have the happiest endings. One of the most infamous is this Scrappy cartoon where he almost drowns his little brother, and if you've seen it, you'd know it's only funny when you talk about it. Actually watching it is kind of shocking. So they definitely needed a hero like Mickey Mouse. And the legacy of the firefighters lives on because this short is represented in the timeless river world in Kingdom Hearts 2, making it the second oldest to be represented in that stage behind Steamboat Willie. So definitely got a legacy within the Disney company, and it's pretty cool. So the music in this short includes Alchronig by Austrian composer Franz Schubert, Jolly Robbers by Franz von Suppe, and this has been associated with firefighters in other cartoons, and A Hot Time in the Old Time by Theo A. Miltz. Finally, an American song, and it was only 34 years old when this short was made. It's like, I don't know, putting Baby Got Back in a Disney cartoon today. It's that time difference. But I had a lot to say about the firefighters, and there is a lot to say about it, and if you want to check it out on your own, you can enjoy it yourself. Hello and welcome to the second half of the year. We've got the 20th cartoon celebration, the Shindig, which released on July 11th, 1930. We're in the second half of the year and it's a bit busier for Mickey and Co. An innovation in the Shindig is in basically how much more anthropomorphized the barnyard animals are. So we're still on a barnyard, but there's definitely a bit more of a human quality to what they're doing. Now, this animation of Mickey and Minnie here gives me flashbacks because this was in one of those Disney Channel remix videos where they paired it to the Black Eyed Peas song, I've Got a Feeling. And that's not a bad song at all, but it's just so strange to see it paired up with old 1930 Mickey Mouse animation. But as you can see here, Horace is definitely a bit more human, while still being a horse, and this scene with Clarabelle, oh, it's interesting. So she hasn't got any clothes on, and she is reading an adult romance novel called 3 Weeks, which was written by Eleanor Glynn in 1907, and was a very notoriously saucy novel, and just referencing it here in this short was so scandalous that the Shindig was banned in Ohio, and that's apparently the only state in America it was banned in. Ohio. You can't make this up. Now they're still working out what kind of voice to give Clarabelle, same as Horace. Now Clarabelle's voice dips between a moo and this much higher voice that Marcelite Garner is giving her, which is very different from the deeper southern voice that you hear April Winchell give her nowadays. But yeah, kind of an innovation to, see them as more, humanized people. But otherwise, this is kind of the same deal as something like the Barn Dance. It's a bit more modern, and Mickey and Minnie are more on good terms, with one big exception, which is coming up. And just talking about the music in this cartoon for a sec, most of it is pretty lowbrow folk music by the standards of a Mickey cartoon this year, but it makes sense for the story. The Things that they're singing are "A Hunting We Will Go," "Turkey in the Straw," "Pop Goes the Weasel." And these are songs that kids and random people still sing. But it's definitely a change of pace from the more, highbrow European music that they've been singing all year so far. Now, in these days, Mickey had a habit of playing with animals. Back in Steamboat Willie, most of that was just swinging cats around and, poking at pigs' udders. And this one takes it to a new extreme with him pulling Minnie's panties back while singing "Pop Goes the Weasel." And it's definitely very strange to see a kid's cartoon character do that. Yep. It's no less strange when I've got notes on the screen. But what saves it a little bit is that Minnie does stand up for herself. This was apparently one of Minnie's modern voice actors, Russi Taylor's favorite Minnie moments, because it kind of shows that they love each other but can just talk to each other, kind of. It's a little funny on her end, and what's funny also is that she's so headstrong in that her hat disappears. Her little hat with the flower in it. Once again, I'm not mocking the animators for forgetting this kind of stuff, but it is something that you can look out for. Some of the first animation eras in big, Disney shorts and stuff. And that's really all I have to say about the Shindig. It's alright, it's mostly singing and dancing to make up for the more plot-driven firefighter short that you had last month. And the critics at the time kind of recognized that. It's more singing and dancing. And really not much else to say about this one, so I'll see you in the next short. And if you're wondering why the copy that I have on screen here has some projection issues, like it kind of trips up for a little bit and then goes back down, I don't know. Now we have one of the longest and best animated shorts of the year, The Chain Gang, which released on August 18th, 1930. And this one approaches 8 minutes, making it one of the longer Mickey cartoons this year. Most of them up to now have been about 7 minutes long. So I guess that was also another sign of the animators either being stretched with the Silly Symphonies shorts or just needing to have more understanding of how the Mickey universe works. So I suppose that's why it took this long to get to the 8-minute mark, which is pretty much feature length by 1930 cartoon standards. You still didn't get that many that exceeded the 10-minute mark. Well, this one is pretty interesting. It's a jail cartoon, and in cartoons in the 20s and 30s, jail was probably the most miserable possible place to be. Not for Mickey, though. Look at him, he's enjoying himself. And why is he even in jail? We never find out. Clarabelle's in there too, we never find out why she's in there. And we also don't know why Pete is the warden. But this is all just for a simple setup. You know, even though you can definitely watch the Mickey cartoons in order and experience some kind of evolution in how the characters function and are utilized and are drawn, it's not as though they have a very strict continuity. It's pretty much like a stage production, you know? It's all dependent on what kind of story the directors and the writers want to put them in. That's basically the extent of the context for why they've got this story. And here we've got some good old jail gags, you know, just hammering stuff in a jail yard. And I don't know if prisons still do this. I don't want to find out myself. But this is definitely a very old-fashioned trope. And it's pretty much being played completely straight because this is an old thing doing an old-fashioned trope. Now, for the most part, this is definitely the same old rubber hose animation that we've had for the past 2 years. But there are some moments later in the short that I'll bring up that sort of point towards the future of how Disney cartoons will move. But before that, I want to get to the music, including The Prisoner's Song by American songwriter Gay Massey, which was released in 1924, making it one of the newer songs used in a Mickey Mouse cartoon. We've also got Spring by German composer Felix Mendelssohn. Sorry, I vaguely pronounced the N, but I just thought you needed to hear it again. And these are among other old-timey favorites that are a bit harder to identify. But among these is Auld Lang Syne in the very end of the short, which was neat for me to hear around New Year's as I was watching this. Now, New Year's has passed as of the time I'm recording this, but still, you know, happy Public Domain Day, everybody. We are public domain now. So I'll come back in when we've got the other thing that I want to talk about, so enjoy the short until then. Enjoying yourself? Good, because here we've got the game changer for Mickey Mouse cartoons this year, and that is Norm Ferguson's animation on these pooches here. Now, this year, Norm Ferguson had also done some animation for the Silly Symphony Frolicking Fish, which sort of pioneered follow-through animation, where instead of very basic loops, Norm basically de-emphasized keyframes and managed to create a fully smooth motion with his dancing fish scene in that. And this is another step forward in that sort of animation, with just the way that the character has a little more sentience, a little more, understanding of their environment. And what we got there were two pooches that today are considered prototypes for Plusho, who doesn't make his first major appearance until next year, but it's pretty cool that now we have the blueprint for Plusho, and it sticks out a little bit in this definitely more traditionally sort of sillily animated short. This is a good gag right here. I'm sure people would still laugh at it today. So overall, I wouldn't say that the Chain Gang is the most consistently animated thing out there, but what is entertaining about it is those well-animated moments, so overall positive on it. Here we have The Gorilla Mystery, which premiered on September 22nd, 1930, and I would say that this is my favorite short of the year. I think this one is genuinely funny, and you should probably watch it before I ruin it by blabbering all over it with you hearing it. Now, this one introduces Beepo the gorilla, which is a minor recurring character in Mickey Mouse cartoons. Like, he's only appeared like 3 times, but still, look at that, he's left an impact already. Love how the artist drew him there, and I also love Walt reading the newspaper just so scared. He looks suitably intimidating, and Mickey looks suitably intimidated. Now, what most people wouldn't know about this short is it's based on a play from 1925 by Ralph Spence, The Gorilla, which is about what you'd expect. Fair maiden gets kidnapped by a gorilla. King Kong before King Kong. Even this short predates King Kong by a few years. And that short had already been adapted to a silent and sound film. And the play, the films, they were all parodic in a sense. So what this short is pretty much doing is spoofing a parody. What Minnie's playing here is All Alone by Irving Berlin, which was a popular song from 1924, which I suppose was still popular 6 years on. And just look at these goofballs. They're just singing and dancing even though there's a gorilla on the loose. And Mickey dancing here is likely Dick Lundy's work. He was a Disney animator who was also rapidly getting better. He was Disney's dance specialist at this point in the studio's history. And if you look at Mickey's moves here, they are definitely moves. And I suppose Minnie playing the piano is also good, but man, look at this movement. I would say this animation still holds up. But as I was saying about this being a parodic spoof of a spoof, I think it kind of shows in just how stupidly Mickey and Minnie are acting here, where there's a gorilla on the loose, and then they get distracted by song and dance. It almost feels like Disney is parodying itself here with just how it gets sidetracked with this funny little song and dance routine. But then the plot comes back, and boy does he come back, because I really like the way the gorilla is animated here. Definitely reminds me of the early designs for Donkey Kong back when Nintendo didn't really have a proper, design for him, so most other companies just drew whatever they wanted. That's what this reminds me of. I suppose that's just how you animate a cartoon gorilla. First half of this short is pretty much just setting things up by doing it in the most silly and spoofy way possible. I suppose it wouldn't entirely work if you didn't get the reference and you thought Mickey and Minnie were just acting completely stupid. But it is kind of salvaged by this reaction from Mickey here. I just love the fact that Walt Disney said that. But it is, in general, one of my favorite things that Mickey has said up till now. So I don't know. Yeah, seems like Minnie's house. Always seems a bit bigger than Mickey's house. And as you can see, Minnie doesn't have her flower hat in this. But it doesn't really need to be put on her. As long as she has a dress, you can tell that she's different from Mickey. Now, comparing this to the Haunted House cartoon from last year, it is pretty cool how much further the Disney artists have come in producing the sort of dark, creepy house. I mean, you look at the lighting and it's very much, showing that they have more attention to detail. They're using life as a reference a little more often. I don't think that Disney had put his animators back in school at this point, but it's still really interesting to see how it's just 1 year later and already there is a quite big difference in just what the artists are capable of. Love that duck, by the way. I'm telling you, this one is genuinely funny. Now, a scene coming up that I won't be able to pad out the runtime until is this chase scene that's kind of feels like a precursor to the Scooby-Doo chase scenes, but I don't know if that was just a traditional vaudeville routine that Scooby-Doo was aping, but here it is. It does definitely seem like a precursor to all that, kind of became associated with these very cartoony chase scenes where nothing makes complete sense. Oh, coming up here is one of the unfriendliest returns in Disney history. It's that darn parrot from Steamboat Willie, or at least a close relative. Mickey still hates parrots, can't blame him. So after Mickey and Minnie, save the day, beat Beepo, they sing this little jingle, la-da-da-da-da-da, and I haven't been able to figure out the name of that jingle, but 69 years later, it does close out the SpongeBob theme song, so yeah, it's been around for a pretty long time and has had several uses in animation. And I think it's just a nice way to cap off the cartoon. Makes it a bit more special to me. There's that gun gag again. And even though it repeats gags, it's still pretty fun. I'd recommend you watch it on your own time. So anyway, next commentary track. This is the penultimate Mickey Mouse cartoon of the year, The Picnic, releasing on October 9th, 1930, and this one is notable for featuring a reappearance of that Pluto prototype from the Chain Gang, one of them anyway. Now in this one, he's called Rover and owned by Minnie, But still, they are definitely solidifying a Mickey Mouse cast because we've now got Mickey, Minnie, and a dog that one of them owns. Horace and Clarabelle are still going to be in the picture for a couple years yet, but we've now got essentially 3 of the sensational 6, so I guess that's worth celebrating. And Rover's voice in this, and I suppose in the last one, is provided by Pinto Colvage, who would later voice Plusho, Goofy, and Grumpy and Sneezy for Snow White, among other Disney characters over the years. It's like little by little we're getting a bit closer to the theatrical era of Disney, so fairly innovative. Now we're still a ways away from, that much, time passing and that much having been noticed and evolved from Disney. But as it is, this is a fine short. It's the one that I've got the least notes on, but what I will say is that, tying a dog to the back of a car and then forcing it to walk while you're driving is probably something that you can't do today because cars are just so much faster. Like, I cannot imagine, any piece of media doing this today. It's just another complete relic of its time. I've also got a sneaking suspicion that this reuses a lot of animation from earlier Alice and Oswald cartoons. It already reuses some animation from the Chain Gang for Rover later on, but sometimes you've got very fluid, Norm Ferguson-like animation, and other times you've got this very, basic, repetitive animation. And I'm wondering if it was just the year winding down and they had to get something out there. Because this one also has a very basic plot. It's just Mickey and Minnie preparing for a picnic and then getting sidetracked by just how much they love each other, and then animals eat the picnic. And exactly how well the animals are animated varies. But overall, we've got some scenes that look fine, like this one. And the song that plays is The Good Old Summertime by George Evans and Ren Shields, and this got several covers back in ye olden times, and here's another one. I will say the thing that I love the most about this is just watching this animation of Mickey and Minnie. They are just complete lovebirds. And the animators are still having fun playing around with reality because they still bend a lot despite how much they love each other. I really don't have too much to say about this one, but I will pop back up again towards the end just to say something about it. But for now, I'll just list off some other milestones from 1930 that I have listed in my notes. So this was the first year that a Mickey Mouse Club had opened, so this was basically a club that kids could hang out at and be entertained by Mickey cartoons, which is a nice, service, especially in these times. Roy E. Disney was born on January 10th this year, so he was Walt's nephew and Roy O. Disney's son, and he would go on to become a big figure in Disney for the rest of the century, up to his death in 2009. So that's pretty neat. Another milestone is that the Mickey Mouse comic strip launched, and Disney kept making them on a consistent basis until 1995, which was important for keeping some integral image of Mickey and pals, outside of the shorts, because other early 30s renderings of them in toys and such look like demons now if you ever go back and look at them. And this comic strip was among the merchandise that had been flowing into stores since the end of 1929, so yeah, it was definitely becoming more common to see Mickey Mouse everywhere, not just at the theaters, but just in general daily life. So I would say that 1930, pretty successful year for Mickey & Co. But elsewhere in the world of animation, Silly Symphonies was hitting its stride. I already went over Frolicking Fish earlier and how that brought around a sort of innovation for Disney animation and how it should move. But it was still sort of their secondary series and treated like a testing ground for artists advancing their animation skills. And this kind of gets us to Snow White. Now, even though Snow White wasn't thought up until 1934, the R&D had pretty much started. Now I think that's the earliest fart joke in a cartoon. I'm sorry I got a bit sidetracked, but I defy you to find an earlier one. But outside of Disney animation, here's just the context of what things were like. You've got Bosco by Hugh Harman and Rudolph Ising, who was the first publicly released Looney Tune. He was starting to appear in shorts now. What's held his and his girlfriend Honey's legacy into question is that his design is more clearly inspired by minstrel shows than other old Inkblot tunes, and that's saying something. But I would recommend watching Man of 1000 Thoughts' video on Bosco, because I'll never be able to see the character through a black person's eyes, so I would hand the mic over to him. But other cartoons from this year included Fleischer's Bimbo the Pup and Betty Boop, the latter created by Max Fleischer and Grim Nashwyck for Fleischer Cartoons. Now, this early Betty Boop was a poodle, but next year we're going to get the human Betty Boop falling into public domain, and this is all just for the context of where Mickey was and how his competition was, getting fired up. And this is the last Mickey short of the year, Pioneer Days, released on November 20th, 1930. Now, warning, this one has some racist and dated cultural depictions of Native Americans, so if you're babysitting Native American children, don't put this one on for them. Basically, the premise of this one is that it's Mickey and Minnie and a few of their animal pals in the pioneer days, and I guess they're just fighting off Native Americans in this one. It's so difficult to talk about, but it's blindingly obvious where Walt Disney and Burt Gillette's sympathies lay, even if this is a pastiche of similar stories in white American lore at the time. And it's like, I really don't care who it is. You just look at this and it's unfair to depict a whole ethnicity as savages, even if it's just for, a children's production. Now, there are scenes later on in this where it's clear that the animators are giving it their all, but it's a very difficult short to defend in terms of how it's held up culturally, so I won't. I don't think it's held up culturally. One thing that you want to know about this is that a reprint of it from 1940 ended a bit earlier. At the end, there is definitely more of a show about them defeating the natives, but in the 1940 edit, 10 years after this, it ends a bit earlier at the part where Mickey rescues Minnie from one of the natives. And I suppose it's just so it could have caused slightly less offense, but I still think that this whole short is pretty offensive. I'm not even Native American, obviously, but it is just kind of strange to go back to this era. Now, one of the characters here sings about their deceased partner by singing the song Darling Nellie Gray. Now, if you don't know, Darling Nellie Gray is an anti-slavery song about an African American losing their significant other. So it is definitely very peculiar how this short appropriates that with these, characters who are vague in their ethnicity, but generally supposed to represent white Americans singing an anti-slavery song, defying Native Americans. It's just a very strange use of that song, and I'm not saying that Disney is the most progressive company ever today, inside or outside, but nowadays they would definitely have a series of cultural consultants to make sure that songs like this are being used in the proper context. but not in 1930 it seems. Now the only thing that I can say sort of works about this short is it kind of has an anti-gun message if you look a little further into it, because all of Mickey and Minnie's victories in this short are claimed by using weapons and tricks other than the legion of rifles that the pioneers have. Like, they have so many rifles, you won't believe it. I'd love to keep going for as long as I can with these MOUSECOMS. I'll just spend the next 4 minutes talking about the MOUSECOMS commentary tracks because I really do not have much left to say about Pioneer Days. It's just kind of a sour note to end the year on. But you can also kind of see that the artists were putting more work into this with each and every short, even if you just don't know if they're gonna hold up. So anyway, this is the end of Season 2 of MOUSECOMS, and I would love to keep these going because the evolution of Disney animation has started all over again thanks to Public Domain Day. You know, a few years ago, 2 years ago, when Steamboat Willie entered the public domain, it was like, wow, we've got this very vintage, old Mickey Mouse short, and now we've got 24 of them in the public domain. So that's pretty interesting. We kind of have a 25th because they repackaged the song Minnie's Yoo-Hoo as a sing-along for the Mickey Mouse Clubs, but I won't count that because it's mostly reused animation. But as a whole, I'm using MOUSECOMS as a way to just sort of re-explore the history of Disney animation, because it does really feel like we're in 1930 again when we have these new shorts to celebrate. And I would love to keep doing these all the way until the 1937 shorts are public domain, so I could be tempted to do a Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs commentary and say, yeah, I know it's wild this was made 9 years after Steamboat Willie, but look at how hard the artists and animators worked to get to that point. And you are seeing it before your very eyes. And I guess it's also just fun to look at as an exercise in just how far we've come, just how much Disney has learned as a company, and just how much we take the other people who aren't Walt Disney and Roy Disney and even Ub Iwerks for granted in the general history of the company. Now, last month, at the time of recording, it was announced that Disney would add this weird AI feature to Disney Plus where you have their characters do anything you want with a prompt. And there are so many ethical issues with that, in my opinion, that I think MOUSECOMS should keep going, because it just goes to show just how much effort goes into these and how you can have a legacy and how you can work hard and you can put effort into cartoons. You don't need an AI to do everything for you. It just really grabs my goat that, you know, we've got AI now that really undermines the work of human artists, and Disney shouldn't be doing that, because look at this, human artists built this company. It wasn't exactly all started by a mouse, but it definitely had people working really hard on this mouse and his world, and making it as entertaining as possible to a 1930 audience. So basically, that's all I have to say about Mickey cartoons from 1930. So I'll see you in 1931. I wonder if it's going to be as, you know, shocking seeing all the different innovations they make that year as it was in 1930. So goodbye for now.